Head trauma is not just major trauma of like going through a windshield or falling 10 feet onto a concrete floor. It can be small repetitive traumas like, kids heading soccer balls just over and over. You do that 100 times a week, and these things can accumulate, and it can be any number of things. And if we think back at the times in our lives where, we fell on the ice and hit our head, or, we slipped and fell back and banged our head just as we hit the ground, these things have an effect. And if you check them and see that there was an impact, this can be helped. It can be changed. The truth is, if somebody does come in and find out, oh, wow, yeah, my brain is not well, that's not a static situation, because in many or most situations, the brain can get better. The brain can heal. The brain can improve by taking proper steps, correct?
By putting the brain in a healing environment. So I did the big NFL study. I don't know if we've ever talked about this.
I don't think so.
When the NFL was having trouble with the truth about traumatic brain injury in football, I got to see Anthony Davis, the Hall of Fame running back from USC. He's called the Notre Dame killer because in 1972, he scored 6 touchdowns against the University of Notre Dame. But he was having trouble with his memory, with his temper, and then he had periods of confusion. And when I scanned him at 54, his brain clearly was a traumatic brain injury, and it looked like he was 85. But 5 months later, his brain looked remarkably better. And then he and I went to the Retired Players Association and gave a presentation. And subsequently, I've scanned and treated 300 NFL players, high levels of damage. Stop lying about it. Playing football is a brain damaging sport. Brain is soft, skull is hard, skull has sharp bony ridges. You cannot have those level of intense over and over impact without damaging the brain. But the exciting part of my work with the NFL players, 80% of them get better when I put them on a rehabilitation program, which is so simple. We basically teach them about brain health, multiple vitamin with high doses of B6, B12, and folate, because that helps boost brain function, high dose fish oil, and then a brain boost that works in 6 different ways. And I published that study. The exciting news that still very few people know is even if you have been bad to your brain, you can make it better, and I can prove it. And that's what I get so excited. You remember we did the show with Gary Busey. I love Gary. And not only did he play football, where he tried to break people's sternums, the big breastbone.
Right.
But he had substance abuse problem, and they had a bad motorcycle accident. And then he had a tumor in his sinus that they radiated. So his brain was terrible. But by doing the right things, he's now got a show on Netflix, and, he's able to work where before people just sort of think of him as a joke, even though he's an Oscar-nominated actor for the Buddy Holly story. And it's just this message over and over again. Your brain can be better if you put it in a healing environment.
And these are not radical things. You're saying B6, B12 with folic acid and fish oils, right?
Yeah, and some other nutrients. I'm a fond of ginkgo and phosphatidylserine and N-acetylcysteine. And I always think when I use supplements, I use them in combinations because the brain doesn't get sick in one way. And so it's not going to get better in one way. That's why there's never going to be the medicine for Alzheimer's disease, because it's not one thing. There's 11 roads to Alzheimer's disease. We have to get on top of all of them.
Right. It just seems to me that if people are really worrying, if they're worrying that they're experiencing depression, if they're worrying that they're losing touch with reality, if they're observing themselves to be exhibiting what they would consider psychiatric symptomatology, if they're being erratic in their relationships, if they're just doing things that are interfering with the pursuit of their healthy goals. So they're starting to get worried, like, am I starting to melt down here? Am I starting to really be unhealthy mentally? But they don't want to tell anybody. They're suffering this silently. They don't want to let on for fear of judgment from family or rejection from employment or whatever. I've talked to so many police officers that have said, I don't want to go to the employee assistance program because they say that that's confidential, but the fact that you even have a file there can cause you to not be promoted or not advance in your career in some way. But if they went to have their brain studied, their brain looked at, they could get answers that could save their life and their career and their happiness. And this is what I've been so anxious to talk to you about, because I've had so many men and women tell me, yeah, Dr. Phil, I hear you about the stigma, but my career is on the line here. I'm in a position where I could be declared an impaired professional, or I've just looked at the culture, and if I do get the help you're talking about, it will absolutely torpedo my career. And this is why you're saying the end of mental illness increases compassion, gets rid of judgment, takes away the stigma, and it's a completely different paradigm than what we now live with.
So, at the risk of being politically incorrect, um, I trained. I'm also a child psychiatrist, and I did my child psychiatry training in Hawaii. And what many people don't know is that Hawaii is an Asian culture. 2/3 of the population is either Chinese or Japanese. And Asian cultures are shame-based cultures. And so if someone's having a mental health problem, they don't want to bring shame to their family. And so our experience was families wouldn't come ask for help until the children were like floridly psychotic, that they waited until the last possible incident. But at the same time, those families would do anything to give their child an advantage. And so changing the discussion from mental illness to brain health leads people to go, oh, with a better brain, they're going to do better in school. With a better brain, they're going to have more friends. With a better brain, they're going to be happier. And so it helps decrease this idea of shame. I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't act this way. To, I wonder if my brain's not firing right. And what I often say to the kids, because we see little kids and old people, it's like, you have a great brain. It's just not tuned right. Sort of like you have a Ferrari and the engine's like working way too hard. So we just need to tune it so you can be the best. And kids love that. They like, oh, make me better, as opposed to fix me, which they just don't want any part of.
You have a comment in your book. You say since 1999, suicide has increased 33%, enough so that it's decreasing overall life expectancy. And during the same period of time, cancer has decreased 27%. To me, that speaks to the fact that the stigma is there. People are not asking for help when their actual quality of life has eroded to the point that they can't endure it anymore. But cancer, they get help because there's no stigma. So one's up a third, the other's down a third.
And since the pandemic, I think suicide is up way more. I've just never seen anything like it. Um, and it's because we're working on the wrong paradigm. Why are we making such progress in cancer and heart disease and virtually every other aspect of medicine, but we're not making progress in psychiatry? And I think it's because the paradigm is wrong, making diagnoses based on symptoms with no biological data. And the end of mental illness is trying to go, there's another way to do this. And we study our outcomes at Amen Clinics. So we've been doing it since 2011. If you come to see us, we actually enter you into a formal outcome study. And on average, patients have 4.2 diagnoses. They're complicated. They have failed 3.3 providers and 5 medications. And at the end of 6 months, if we treat them, 84% are better. No one's got those outcomes that publishes them. No. And it's because we get more information and we're decreasing stigma. But what I love, we increase compliance. People want better brains. Like with my NFL group, they like being coached. And so they'll do the things knowing that in 4 months or 6 months later, I'm likely to rescan them and go, are we doing better? And I just get so excited about that. And I mentioned to you when we were not on camera about this kid, Jose, who came to see me because of your show. Like 10 years ago, you were doing a show on compulsive cheaters. And he cheated on his wife 8 times in 4 years. His wife had a gun. She was going to kill him. And as part of the show, I got to scan him. He had a damaged brain from football, mixed martial arts, had terrible habits. And when we fixed his brain and 7 months later, I scanned it so much better, he's making better decisions. And I don't know if you'd agree with me, but ultimately a person's success in life is a sum of all the decisions they've made. And as you make better decisions, your wife doesn't want to kill you anymore. You're more likely to not have to visit your children on the weekend. And he just graduated from nurse anesthetist school. I'm just so proud of him. With a better brain comes a better life.